DeChellis should be a candidate for the ETSU head men's basketball coaching position. I mean, if they're not going to hire Jason Shea, I still think they'll hire Jason Shea. Hi, I'm Marky Bilson here, talking in my first video of the day a little bit about Brian Nolan's online forum of yesterday. He talked briefly about the ETSU head coaching search, tried not to give very much. I did think that there was a significant nugget where he said that he would be making the decision on who the coach would be. Figure of speech, I don't know, but I'm kind of the belief that maybe, he is the guy signing off on this, because otherwise, why would you be considering other candidates other than the successful assistant coach who's been recommended for the position and will keep a good thing going? I don't get it. But if you were going to go to the outside, I do think that ETSU should consider Ed DeChellis. Now, there's a couple of things, Brian Nolan, I mentioned that I thought, he joked about, well, Michael Jordan hasn't called me with a coaching candidate. And if you're an ETSU fan, you ought to know that Michael Jordan once did call ETSU with a recommendation for a head coaching candidate. And they didn't hire him. It was Buzz Peterson, and instead they hired Ed DeChellis, and that was a good thing. But what really bothers me is I think Ed DeChellis might be the most underrated sports figure in the history of the Tri-Cities. This is a guy who basically, the reason we don't think of those Mr. Jennings glory years as being an aberration, as being Jacksonville's Artis Gilmore years, is because of Ed DeChellis. The resurrection he had to do for ETSU basketball was incredible, and in 7 years, he brought the Buccaneers to basically where they are now, after 5 years of Steve Forbes. And remember, Steve Forbes had a heck of a lot more ingredients to build a basketball team than Ed DeChellis did. Ed DeChellis had one player. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But what bothered me about the online forum of yesterday from Brian Nolan, a lot of things, but what this one did, is that he talked about the great teams of the ETSU Buccaneers in the 2000s, the first decade of the century, under Murray Bartow. Now, to be fair, Murray Bartow did lead the Buccaneers with DeChellis' players in 2004 to the NCAA tournament. And when DeChellis' players graduated, then Murray Bartow went 7-19. But you know what? Murray Bartow did take the Buccaneers to the NCAA tournament in 2009. Let's give him that credit, And I mean, there was the one year where they played for the ASUN title and then got smashed by Belmont in that decade. And so they were basically an up and down team. The continued success, the 4 straight Southern Conference championships, that was DeChellis, and that was a huge rebuild. And, I understand, Nolan once, Bartow was once under Nolan's employ. DeChellis wasn't. I get it. I also remember Nolan calling Bartow a great coach and then firing him 2 years later. But if you're looking for an outside candidate to replace Steve Forbes, and why you would, I don't know, because it ought to be Jason Shea, I'm giving Annapolis a call, and I'm seeing if Eddie D wants to come back. I understand that DeChellis is yesterday's coach, but he'd have a coach who'd win, who'd graduate his players. And you know what else? You'd create a sense of identity for ETSU basketball that no other coach could possibly have. Now, at 61, Forbes is older than the candidates that ETSU has looked at so far. He's older than almost any candidate a college basketball program will look at. But you know what? He's also closer to Steve Forbes' age than any of the existing candidates now that Chris Jans has reportedly taken his name out of the search. And you get the idea that, maybe if you're a coach, you're not really going anywhere in Navy. You can only go so far at Navy. And, I could continue to win at ETSU. I could bring him back to the national rankings And that would really establish my legacy. I made ETSU basketball. And that's what Ed DeChellis' legacy would be. So it would be very appealing for him to return. The other thing, you wouldn't have to worry about a coach being here today, gone tomorrow, when you've got a 61-year-old coach. I don't know how much, fuel he's got left in the tank. Would he coach for 4 years? Would he coach for 10 years? Would he coach longer, shorter? I don't know. But I know he wouldn't be departing for anywhere else. And you can't say that about any of the other candidates that ETSU is considering. DeChellis is tough. He coaches at Navy, for crying out loud. Of course he's tough. In fact, in 2003, kicked leading scorer Tyrus Wade off the team. No telling how far the 2003 and 2004 Bucks could have gone with Wade under the fold. So some players would likely transfer away. Boy, this guy, military man, my goodness, this sort of thing. So, yeah, that's why Shea is so appealing, and I've said it all along. You're probably not going to have many players transfer from a pretty good team returning if you hire Shea. But let me just recap how good of a job DeChellis did here. It's worth repeating, because no other coach, not even Les Robinson, resurrected the Buccaneers like DeChellis did. DeChellis inherited a 7-20 team. The team, I went to those practices that DeChellis had his first practices. That team was out of shape. You know something else? They were flunking out. He inherited one eligible player, Kyle Keaton, if you want to know. I mean, they had one returning starter. It was Titus Shelton in 1996, but he only had one player that was even eligible to play. He had to, before the basketball season, he had to get this team academically eligible to play. At one point, first semester he was the coach, he had 7 players against Lees McRae. Still won a ball game. Now, the path was not always smooth, but that first team he had, it wasn't any good, but it still found a way to beat Chattanooga, which was a Sweet 16 participant, and Marshall, who won their division in the Southern Conference. And in 3 years, he had the Bucks with a winning record, 17-12, not bad. 5 years, brought in Zakiwa Dude, a Mr. Arkansas basketball, similar to Steve Forbes bringing in Bo Hodges, a Mr. Tennessee basketball, when he had similar honors and such. And Zakiwa Dude led the Buccaneers to 4 straight Southern Conference championships in the regular season. They were bounced from the SoCon tournament the first 2 years, but they won at the final 2 that he was there. And remember this, Steve Forbes, great job. No one's taken that away from him. Also kept his team very well academically sound. DeChellis graduated all his players. The team that Forbes inherited was 16-14. He had A.J. Merriweather. He had DeSanta Bradford. That's what Murray Bartow left over. DeChellis had nothing. DeChellis had Kyle Keaton. That's it. And that first team still found a way to beat a Sweet 16 team. Think about that. At the end of DeChellis' tenure, the Buccaneers were as strong as they are today. I know they may not have won quite as many games, but remember, they played fewer games in that era as well. Now, I'll even give you this. DeChellis brought the Bucks back to Freedom Hall 20 years before it became in vogue. That Lees McRae, that game with 7 players I was telling you about. ETSU couldn't play at the Mini Dome that day because they were playing football against Villanova in the playoffs. And instead of putting the team in Brooks Gym, which they usually did, DeChellis had them in Freedom Hall. And they beat Lees McRae and, and all the Freedom Hall. I mean, say what you will and all that. But, I mean, he was even thinking of the program in that higher level, playing at a big arena and not the reserve arena, if you will. Since leaving ETSU in 2003, he's lost more than he's won. I'll give you that. But he's had to coach at 2 tough places, Penn State and Navy. And remember, when he was an assistant at Penn State, they were usually in the Atlantic 10. That's one of the reasons why they won then. Big Ten, it's a little bit different. But here's what he did do at Penn State. He won an NCAA tournament game. He won the National Invitational Tournament. Yeah, the NIT. He won 27 games at Penn State in a season. That's the Nittany Lions record. And at Navy, yeah, he's lost more than he's won. But he posted a 20 victory season. And that's the Middy's only 20 victory season of this century. It's tough to win there, folks. I mean, I don't know what else I can tell you. And yet, on occasion, he's done it. And on my sports talk show, I remember a couple times I had John Feinstein. Feinstein really sang the praises of Ed DeChellis because Feinstein has a pretty good relationship with the Navy athletic department. He's done color commentary for him and such. Anyway, ETSU, they'd be able to pay DeChellis what Navy does. That's not a problem. And in fact, DeChellis coached the Buccaneers in an era where coaches were supposed to bring in their own money. So he may still have some contacts that can either keep the money going or maybe bring in some extra money to the program. Think about that. But I'm going to tell you, and a lot of it is the program that he built, ETSU is the easiest place of any of those three programs, Navy, Penn State, ETSU, that's the easiest place to win in basketball. Think about that. That's pretty big. Now, I know, it's 17 years ago, and I had somebody tweet me, and they said, you don't bring in who departed, that's cuck behavior or something. Well, ETSU wanted to bring back Sonny Smith in the 80s from Auburn. They almost did, but it fell through at the last instant, and Les Robinson came in instead. But even if you don't believe that, I was trying to think of somebody who came back, and I remembered Dick LeBeau, the Hall of Fame defensive coordinator. He left to coach the Cincinnati Bengals, and then, when his head coaching tenure with the Bengals didn't turn out to be so good, he returned to the Steelers as defensive coordinator. What'd they do? They won 2 Super Bowls! So don't give me this. As I said, the one thing DeChellis would be able to bring you, stability. If he has a run in the NCAA tournament next year, he's not going someplace else. That's big. You wouldn't have to worry about the off-court incidents that you were considering when Chris Jans was reportedly a candidate. Again, as I said, he wouldn't bolt you if you went to the Final Four. If you were a Butler or a VCU or a Loyola Marymount or a George Mason that got hot in a tournament. No, you wouldn't. So really, did I say Loyola Marymount? Loyola, Illinois, the Ramblers, a couple of years back. Now, I'm still, look, I mean, that is 17 years ago. Shea's got to be the choice, right? But if there's something we don't know about Jason Shea, if he sprouts a tail at midnight and we didn't know that or something and all that, and you absolutely have to bring in a coach from the outside, I want him to talk to DeChellis. And I also want the Tri-Cities to realize what this guy did for this program once upon a time. Folks, I'm Marky Bilson, and if you like these Facebook videos, or even if you don't, they become YouTube videos. And if you're watching on YouTube, I ask you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the bell. I put content up every day, and it's quite enjoyable. And it's also hard-hitting. You get the real truth and analysis and things that are, need to be said about sports in this area that other people are either too afraid or unwilling to say. I guess that would go hand in hand, wouldn't it? So, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow me on Medium. Keep watching the videos, and until next time, next video, I might tell you who they ought to consider ETSU as an assistant coach. I'm Marky Bilson.